From Recorded Future News and PRX, this is Click Here. Hey there, it's Dina. A quick note before we start. Twice a month, we team up with WAMU and NPR's 1A news magazine for something we call CyberMonday. This time, we're looking at how artificial intelligence is making its way into policing. And when one police department put that to the test, it raised a bigger question. Because they're using a tool that promises to turn body camera footage into police reports. Faster paperwork, less time behind a desk. But if AI is helping write the official record of what happened, what happens to human memory? Who checks it? And what happens if AI gets it wrong? This isn't about futuristic cops. It's something quieter than that. Because AI could be creating the paperwork that helps decide who gets charged, who gets believed, and who goes free. The first voice you'll hear is from 1A's host, Jen White.
Dina, welcome back.
Thanks so much.
Okay, so when we say AI is entering policing, what does that actually mean right now?
It has actually slipped into all kinds of aspects of policing. We just finished some reporting on a pilot in Edmonton in Canada that's putting facial recognition on police body cams to match faces to mugshots. There's AI-enhanced license plate readers which scan and track vehicles and over time. There's gunshot detection that uses AI. But the new thing that we were focusing on was the AI-generated police reports. And as you said, it may sound small, but it's actually one of the most important documents in the entire justice system. They're a first draft of what happened. And once something is in that report, it tends to carry forward, right, into charging decisions, into courtrooms, and how a case is even understood.
But as you said, this version of what happened can have legal ramifications. So talk about the significance of that.
Well, let's say that an officer doesn't remember all the details of something that happened or remembers it in a certain way. They're human. So they would normally write out that report, and then they would check it and recheck it. What this first draft does is kind of the same way that ChatGPT, if you're using it, it's really easy to lean on it too much. The concern is that the officers will lean on this too much, that draft one's version of events colors the way they remember the events. And because of that, it wouldn't be exactly accurate.
So for the companies that are developing this technology, what are they saying this technology can do? What are they promising?
It's the big promise of AI, right? The pitch is efficiency. There's a company called Axon. They make tasers and body cameras, and they've developed a tool that takes body camera footage, transcribes it, and then turns it into a draft police report. So instead of an officer sort of sitting down after a shift and writing everything out, this system does what they call a first pass or a first draft, and then the officer edits it, and the promise is less time typing, more time policing. But it turns out that officers do not love AI as much as we think they might love AI, and that there are a lot of little details that go into a police report. So it's not just what transpired when you pulled someone over or arrested someone. There are all kinds of exhibits that you have to bag and number and put that into the report. So what they found is that they expected, Axon said they thought there would be a 40% increase in productivity. And what they found at some of these pilots that they used is that there was actually no improvement.
Dina, whenever you bring these stories to us, I'm always like, how did you start looking at this story in the first place? What brought it on your radar?
We had heard that there were these different pilots with technology, and clearly, Click Here, we're all about how technology is changing everything about our lives. And we'd heard about the Axon pilot. We track Axon pretty carefully. Axon is trying very hard to find a way to marry technology and policing, and to make it more efficient and to make it more fair. And it's just sometimes they're a little bit out there with wanting to use the technology.
You were a counterterrorism reporter at NPR for many years. As you're looking at the way technology is being integrated into policing, are there any similarities with what you found when you were on the counterterrorism beat?
A huge number. And in fact, the reason why I ended up in tech was because that's where counterterrorism was going. It started with this sort of taking all this information and hoping you can see a pattern so that you can sort of, this sounds very sci-fi, but that you could figure out who might have a propensity to be a terrorist. And so the concern is that, that's a test, but what's going on with policing and technology is very much touching all of us in big ways. License plate readers, it sounds like it's pretty benign. But in fact, knowing what your license plate is and tracking it across state lines and somewhere else gives them all kinds of information that you don't really even think about.
Well, who gets to decide whether a technology is used in policing here in the U.S.?
That's one of the problems and that's really the tension that we're trying to explore in our story is this stuff that just gets applied and you get no voice in it? Or is this something where you can stand up and say, no, I think this is a little bit too intrusive. I think this is more than what I want in my community. And there's not enough of that dialogue. So one of the things we're trying to do is raise awareness so that you do ask, hey, are you guys using facial recognition with body cameras in some way? Are you using AI to write police reports? What are you seeing when you do that? And it's not accusing them of anything. This is very new technology. We don't know where it goes wrong all the time, so we need to ask those questions.
We got this question from HD who says, if AI interprets police body camera footage, could we get more factual reports?
That's the dream, right, is that there would be more factual reports. But again, think about if you just read the transcript of something, as an audio person, reading a transcript of something versus listening to it is completely different. And tone of voice is really important. But, think about how the debate has changed, right? Now that every police are wearing body cameras, when they aren't on, when they say, hey, sorry, I forgot to turn it on, people go, that seems weird to me.
Well, that brings us to the reporting we're going to hear from you. You talked to some of the police departments testing this new technology. Just give us a little bit of a preview. Are they embracing this, or are you hearing a more cautious approach?
Both. So, interestingly, we found our own pilot program that Axon didn't provide for us, and they were pretty skeptical about how much it had really changed and how it had really saved any time at all. In fact, they found that it was Manchester. It didn't save time in the least. We talked to another person in Florida, and he said his cops loved it. So I think the jury's still out.
Coming up, Dina and her team look at AI-generated police reports. Who's using them? How do they work? And are they saving time or quietly reshaping the record? That's just ahead.
There's technology in the abstract, right? Its promises, how people think it might be used. But when it meets the realities of policing, it almost invariably becomes changed. It's almost a never-ending puzzle of complications and difficulties in implementation. And it's always going to be interesting.
Ian Adams spent more than a decade as a police officer in Utah, which was long enough to watch a whole raft of police technologies cycle through the department. Some stuck, some didn't. But every now and then, something would show up that changed the job. And for Ian, one of those moments was 2011, when he strapped on a body camera. Back then, most departments had not even heard of them yet.
They were testing units, so by the time they became a big part of the national conversation, I was pretty experienced with them. I sort of heard people, especially academics, talking about the camera in a way that didn't make a lot of sense to me.
Keep your window down. Keep your window down. I'm going to get you out of the car.
But for Ian Adams, that just didn't ring true. He didn't think the cameras would end up helping that way.
Get out! Damn. When we tell you to do something, you do it. You understand?
This is the body cam audio from the arrest of Tariq Hill in 2024. He used to be a star wide receiver for the Miami Dolphins, and he was pulled over just outside the stadium, apparently for reckless driving. And, as you can hear, the presence of a camera didn't exactly soften the moment.
You understand? Not what you want, but what we tell you. You're a little confused.
By the 2010s, body cameras had become the defining technology of the police reform movement. But Ian never thought they would actually change behavior. He thought the cameras would just document it.
I saw it as a tool that helped me quite a bit. It helped protect me. in the cases of spurious complaints. And it helped me capture what I was seeing out there in the world as a police officer, which is very, very interesting, right?
Ian is now an assistant professor at the University of South Carolina. And when the hype around AI and large language models began, he figured it was only a matter of time before it showed up in policing, too.
So I knew right away this is a really interesting example of technology being adapted right into the workplace, the police workplace.
Because if cameras could capture what happened, the next step was obvious. What if they could write it down? Enter Draft One, a product made by the police technology company Axon. And what it does is pretty simple. It takes body camera footage, transcribes it, and then feeds it into an AI system that generates a first draft of a police report, one officers can edit and file. The idea is straightforward: save time, cut paperwork. Pretty soon after Draft One hit the market, Ian got a call from the Manchester Police Department in New Hampshire. They wanted him to do a simple thing: help them see if Draft One lived up to its promise to cut down on the time it takes to write police reports.
I am heavily involved in evidence-based policing, and there's a lot of nerds like myself, as we call ourselves, the nerd herd.
Officer Matthew Barter is a lieutenant at the Manchester Police Department. Manchester has about 250 officers, and it's considered a mid-sized department. And according to Matt, while it's got its fair share of both suburban and urban problems, it's also big enough to provide a statistically significant study.
So as much as I'm excited about a lot of this technology, I also know it's extremely important that we test it, and we test it kind of in an independent way and in a scientific way.
To hear Axon tell it, this was all about getting police out of the station and onto the streets, interacting with the community.
About half of a police officer's day is spent doing data entry, bureaucratic tasks.
This is Rick Smith, the CEO of Axon.
Every time a police officer stops somebody, they're filling out a new report, and all of these things add up over time, and it's beginning to squeeze out the actual job that these people are out to do.
Draft One is supposed to help solve that problem by transcribing the audio captured in a police body cam. It doesn't capture tone of voice. It isn't great if there's lots of crosstalk. But the idea is that it can produce a first draft of a report, and then police only need to fill in the blanks. Axon's Smith again.
Boy, if we could just help extract the police report from all the things an officer says and hears during the interaction, that would be tremendously valuable. If a police officer spends half of their shift writing reports, and we could cut that time in half, that's roughly the equivalent of increasing your force size by 50%.
So that's the dream, or at least the Axon dream. So Ian and Matt from the Manchester Police Department decided to run a simple controlled test.
We ran this experiment where half the officers were able to use the Draft One product, half had to use just traditional report writing.
And they let the experiment run for 6 weeks.
And at the end of that, when we compare the duration of how long it took them from start to finish, from the time they opened a report to the time they submitted it, there was no significant effect on time savings.
And were you surprised by that?
I am surprised. I certainly thought, given my own experience with ChatGPT, we would expect some significant time savings. As a scientist, it's a rare pleasure to be surprised, to be totally rejected by the data.
Now, granted, this is a single 6-week trial in just one department, so more research needs to be done. But at least in this one early study, the idea that AI-generated reports will free up cops to do their jobs, well, it didn't quite work out that way, which Matt in Manchester says was unfortunate, but not totally surprising.
I never, really overly get my hopes up on these things. I've also seen, enough studies that things aren't always work out the way people believe they're going to.
Ian and Matt spent a lot of time trying to figure out why their Manchester experiment turned out the way it did. And among other things, it has to do with the police report itself. A lot more goes into it than the who, what, where of a call. The bulk of the report is actually data entry. Lots and lots of data entry. For example, let's say an officer on the scene takes 4 witness statements, collects 15 pieces of evidence, takes a bunch of photographs, and then goes back to the station.
Every person he or she talked to is a piece of information that needs to be added to that database. Name, date of birth, social, address, phone number.
The witness statement has to be scanned and then attached to the report as a PDF.
Every piece of property that was held needs to be entered into evidence physically, so they're going to have to go seal it in an evidentiary bag.
And that gets a number and then has to go into the report as well. Another issue is that not every interaction between officers and the public has a body cam video that AI can use to generate a report. For an officer who's on desk duty and is taking phone calls, well, there's no body cam footage for that. There is also, of course, the possibility that not every officer wants to use AI. Put that all together, and you might not get the same time savings that something like Draft One says it could provide. Do you think there was sort of this maybe lack of understanding that maybe the bulk of the time wasn't writing the narrative, but is in fact all these other things?
Oh, I think that absolutely has to be part of it.
When we asked Axon about Ian's study, they were quick to say that this was just one department's experience. And they told us they've heard from plenty of officers who say Draft One is saving them tons of time. Case in point, they put us in touch with the technology sergeant at the Fort Collins Police Department in Colorado, a guy named Bob Younger. And Bob said his department loved it. But even if it can help some departments, Ian thinks generative AI is better suited to lower stakes nuts and bolts work, things like proofreading and tightening language and improving consistency across different reports.
Officers aren't generally hired for their immaculate writing skills. If you go into any agency and talk to the sergeants, they're going to tell you some of their frustrations about police reports is they're having to revise them, they're having to add to them.
And helping officers get all the details right on that first report is something Axon thought about. Noah Spitzer-Williams runs the Draft One team, and he says that humans forget things all the time, even when they aren't under stress. And Draft One's software program helps with that.
It reminds them of things that they might have forgotten, because many officers, they might not actually write that report until several hours later. And now it's 2 a.m. They just want to get home, but they got 3 reports they got to get through before they can do that. And, we're all human, right? They just might not remember all the details. But the advantage of Draft One is it's going to evaluate the entire body camera video, and it's going to pull out details that might have been missed.
Ian says that kind of improvement would not only help the police, but also everyone who relies on the quality and accuracy of their reports.
A lot hinges on the police report, from prosecutor decisions, how defense attorneys approach this, how defendants themselves think about their role in the case against them, juries, judges, even the media and academics consume police reports to one degree or another. And so as this technology takes hold in American policing, we might expect to see some downstream effects for all those people as well.
All the more reason to make sure AI-generated police reports are accurate and fair. Beyond just whether or not products like Draft One save time, people worry about for-profit companies getting so involved with policing that they actually dictate how it's done. Just ask Andrew Guthrie Ferguson. He's a law professor at American University and at one time was a public defender.
I worry that the incentives of a company that is, legally, fiduciarily responsible to its shareholders to sell and grow and get bigger and bigger might run and be in conflict with the interests of a city or a community that might want less policing or less surveillance or fewer, bells and whistles on the police body cameras.
The maker of Draft One, Axon, is a publicly traded company, which means they're practically required to maximize shareholder value. In other words, make as much money as possible. Axon's CEO, Rick Smith, told us that the company aspires to be in every part of the judicial process, to do for policing what Apple did for smartphones. Andrew, for his part, says we should think carefully about what happens when one company wields that much influence over such an important part of society, particularly if there aren't the regulations in place to govern and hold it accountable. When it comes to setting rules for new tech generally, Congress has a pretty mixed record. It waited to set up the guardrails for the internet and ended up providing immunity to tech companies, and lawmakers are still trying to free themselves from that. They're trying to do better with AI by holding hearings and trying to regulate its use in some narrow instances, like in political ads. But no regulations exist for state or local police. And that worries Andrew. He's written law review articles trying to raise the alarm.
There's no place to ask these hard questions. It shouldn't be law professors that are writing law review articles that no one reads about, like, what are the hard issues here? Like, there should be a process. Wait a minute, you want to change policing by introducing an AI-assisted police report?
He says this shouldn't be a conversation between a for-profit company and a police department.
There should be some other stakeholders involved. Like, let's ask the community. Let's ask the city council. Let's ask the people who study AI and know all the problems.
He worries about how Silicon Valley's move fast and break things approach might apply to policing.
The things that we're breaking are some of our, structures of society and our privacy rights and our ability to be secure and not be under constant surveillance. And I just don't think we've had the conversation we should be having about those technologies.
Ian Adams agrees. And in the meantime, he cautions police departments to take it slowly and thoughtfully. That's in part because of what he discovered in Manchester, but also because he's been here before. Remember, he was one of the officers involved in the early adoption of body cams.
I think even the policy and public view of body-worn cameras was that they were tools of deterrence, that they were going to deter officers from using force or deter officers from doing something bad.
Ian has always been skeptical that police behavior would change, and subsequent studies proved him right.
When you look across 80 or 100 of these types of experiments, then it allows us to get a really good grasp of the overall effect. And the overall effect of body cameras has probably been to, maybe at the margins, very, very small effects for use of force. And that's after a decade of research.
It turns out body-worn cameras really just provide documentation after the fact. So it provides the possibility of accountability and transparency if police departments decide to avail themselves of it. So the net effect of AI on police reports, or police work more generally, may be something we never expected. Yet it is being quickly adopted before we have time to figure that out.
I just feel like we're such at the beginning of this next second phase of sort of body camera and AI, but they're already being widely adopted across the US. Like, we're always behind that adoption curve.
Technology is great, Ian says, but we tend to embrace it before it's been tested and married to regulation and policy.
Like, hey, everybody take a deep breath. We should be really careful about the claims around products before they're evaluated in the context they're meant to be used, not the sort of studio where they were developed.
His point is this: it takes a long time to sort out exactly how new technologies will affect the real world, much less the complex environment of American policing.
Up next, who controls the data when big tech enters the world of policing? I'm Jen White. We'll be right back.
Hey there, it's Dina again. The scary thing about AI and policing isn't really the robots. It's the paperwork, the databases, the quiet systems that decide what counts as truth. And once those systems start talking to each other, policing begins to change in ways that are harder to see. You're listening to one of our regular Cyber Mondays with WAMU's Jen White, and we'll get back to the show. The next voice you'll hear is Jen's.
Now back to today's installment of our Cyber Monday series. Joining us now to talk about how new technologies are transforming policing and the criminal justice system is Andrew Guthrie Ferguson. He's a law professor at the George Washington School of Law and author of the new book, Your Data Will Be Used Against You, Policing in the Age of Self-Surveillance. Andrew, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
Now, we just heard the story from Dina Temple-Raston focusing on using AI to write police reports. And that's just one of a host of technologies you touch on in your new book. You say this new tech is transforming policing and even the criminal justice system more broadly. So what happens when policing becomes increasingly datafied, more automated and mediated through these systems people don't fully understand?
I think the one thing that we've seen is AI is giving police a superpower. It is changing the scale, the speed, the aggregation of being able to use information in different ways. Like take a video camera. We have video cameras on the street all of the time. We've gotten used to them. But now that video camera has video analytics running over it. So every object on that video stream can be identified: man, woman, child, car, bus, tricycle. And the way we can do it is AI, right? We've trained the AI systems to be able to identify those particular objects as something. Now expand that one video camera to hundreds and thousands, all feeding back to a real-time crime center, where you can now track through a city all of the tricycles or bicycles or vans or red hats.
It seems like this technology has the potential to either or both expose problems in our system or create new problems. What are you seeing right now?
One of the real concerns with AI police reports is it is the document that police have to rely on, obviously, prosecutors have to rely on, judges have to rely on in a preventive detention system where they're given the affidavit. And in a case of our current criminal justice system where 95% of the cases result in plea bargains, the police report almost never gets interrogated. So here you have this document that we all rely on. I was a public defender before teaching. Everyone relied on the police report. But now if that has been AI generated or partially AI generated, it means the entire system is sort of infected with this one document that's controlling the whole pathway of a criminal case in ways we haven't fully comprehended or thought about, well, what does it mean? And that might not be the fault of the technology. It might actually be the fault of our reliance on a police report to do so much work.
You use the word infected. That's a strong word.
I think it's interesting because if there's an error there, you may never get to see whether it can be cured later on, right? There may be no moment in time where we go back to check the videotape to see if we got it right. It may all be based on whether there was an omission, an error, some kind of concern, mistranslation in this initial document that could change, whether someone gets a diversionary program, whether they get to get a good plea bargain, whether they get released before trial. And it could all be because of some issue in that police report.
One thing that struck me is that an AI-generated report, it may sound polished, it may sound authoritative, it may even sound objective. So what concern, if any, do you have that the end users of these reports, the judges, the prosecutors, and perhaps rare cases, juries, may trust these documents more because of a presumed sense of impartiality?
I think that's fair. I mean, the sense that technology gets it right, that it must be an accurate transcription, is something I think we all buy into, even if we know in the back of our minds, of course, there are going to be mistranslations and misunderstandings and the rest. But I think we have this general deference to technology, especially if we don't feel like we know better. And I think that's a real fear as it goes through that, well, this must have gotten it correct because the technology did it, the AI did it. And I think that that's a real danger if you can't have moments in time in the system to interrogate whether it did get it correctly or not.
Well, Axon is one of the major companies developing this broad spectrum of public safety technology. I want us to listen to part of a promotional video that describes their vision of a future that incorporates license plate readers, surveillance cameras, drones, basically a system that's completely connected and seamlessly shares data in real time.
911, this is Michael Harris with Secure Solutions Global Security Operations Center. We are currently witnessing a crime in progress at our store location at 1201 North Wilmington. The crime appears to be a robbery in progress.
This is a stolen vehicle.
Let's get a drone out there.
So the video really focuses on the seamless, efficient criminal justice system, from identifying a crime to writing a report. But from your perspective, how much should efficiency drive the design of the criminal justice system?
Well, I think efficiency is the driver because the police are asking Axon and other companies for that efficiency. I think citizens have other questions they might want to ask about accuracy and completeness and being able to protect, privacy and civil liberties as that drone flies over to the scene. Is it recording? What are the rules about recording? Who can get access to it? What happens if there's an incident of like police brutality or any of those things? But I think that efficiency has always been the push, right? And watching, Axon sort of AI policing future it almost feels like a movie. It is objectively impressive in the sense of what you can do, what you can see, and all of these real-time crime center technologies all being linked together in a really, really powerful centralized command center. Are there places that drones won't fly? Are there places that cameras shouldn't be on? Do you really want it outside a medical clinic or a church? Who gets access to this? Why isn't city data as opposed to why would the police get to control who has access and who has not? And those are open questions that I think cities should be interrogating about if we are investing in these large-scale new surveillance centers, what are the rule sets before they get turned on the people?
So very briefly, how much control do we have as individuals right now to control what becomes evidence and what doesn't?
Almost none. Honestly, almost none. I mean, you can choose what to put in your home and put on your door, but generally speaking, with a warrant, almost everything you create in a digital age can be available to the police with a warrant, and many times without a warrant.
That's Andrew Guthrie Ferguson. He's a professor of law at the George Washington University Law School and author of the new book, Your Data Will Be Used Against You, Policing in the Age of Self-Surveillance. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Today's producer was Allison Brody with help from Click Here's Megan Dietrich. And this program comes to you from WAMU, part of American University in Washington, distributed by NPR. I'm Jen White. This is 1A.
That was part of our conversation with 1A host Jen White about how AI is changing how police operate across the country. You can hear the full segment at wamu.org. Click Here is a production of Recorded Future News and PRX. Today's show was written and produced by Megan Dietrich, Sean Powers, Erica Gaida, Zach Hirsch, and Casey Georgie. It was edited by Karen Duffin and Sarah Quevedo, and fact-checked by Darren Ankrum. Original music is by Ben Livingston, with additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. Our staff writer is Lucas Riley, our illustrator is Megan Goff, and our sound designers and engineers are Jake Cook and Jesse Neiswanger. I'm Dina Temple-Raston, and thanks for listening.